The Northern Killer, the Sundfjord Mystery. Chapter 1. The Quiet Beginning. Chief Jakob Evensen had lived in Sundfjord his whole life. Nestled between icy fjords and towering pine forests, the small northern Norwegian town was more accustomed to fish markets and snowstorms than murder investigations. It was the 1980s, and the world seemed a faraway concept. Here, people still left their doors unlocked, and neighbors helped one another dig their cars out of the snow. Jakob was a man of routine. At 54, his life revolved around his modest office in the town's police station, a creaky wooden building that smelled perpetually of coffee and damp wool. He had 3 officers under him: Lars, a bright-eyed 20-something eager to prove himself; Astrid, a no-nonsense woman in her early 40s who kept the place running; and Gunnar, a burly but soft-spoken man nearing retirement. One morning in late February, as Jakob sipped his coffee and looked out at the snow-covered main street, Astrid burst into his office. "Jakob, you need to see this." Astrid rarely interrupted him without good reason. Jakob pulled on his coat and followed her to a frozen lake just outside of town. A fisherman had discovered the body, a man face down on the ice, dressed in heavy winter gear. The cold had preserved him unnaturally well. Jakob knelt beside the body, noting the blood pooling around a head wound. This wasn't an accident. Sundfjord had seen its share of mishaps, drunken falls, machinery accidents, but not this. Not murder. The man was unrecognizable, his features hidden beneath a knitted hat and scarf, but a glance at his belongings, a fishing knife, a notebook, revealed his identity. It was Erik Olsen, a local recluse who lived on the outskirts of town. Jakob felt a pang of guilt. He had spoken to Erik only a few times in passing. The man kept to himself, rarely mingling with the community. "Who would want to kill Erik?" Lars asked, his breath visible in the frosty air. Jakob didn't answer. His gut told him this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Snow. The investigation began slowly, as it often did in a town like Sundfjord. Jakob and his team interviewed locals, but Erik's reclusive nature meant few had much to say. Most assumed he was just another loner, content to fish and chop wood in solitude. But one name kept coming up: Hanne Pedersen, the owner of the small general store. Erik had argued with her about a debt a few weeks before his death. Jakob visited Hanne at her shop, a warm haven filled with the smell of dried cod and coffee. She denied any involvement, her tone defensive but firm. "Erik was a pain, sure, but I wouldn't kill him over a few kroner." The lack of evidence gnawed at Jakob. He spent evenings poring over Erik's notebook, hoping for clues. Most of the entries were mundane: fishing notes, weather observations, but one stood out. It mentioned a meeting by the lake, scheduled for the night Erik was killed. No name was attached, only a cryptic line: "They know too much." Jakob shared this with Astrid, who suggested they search Erik's cabin. It was a tiny, ramshackle place buried under snow. Inside, they found more notebooks, all filled with similar observations. But one hidden beneath a loose floorboard contained a list of names. Sundfjord's residents. Some names were crossed out. Jakob's stomach churned. Erik hadn't just been a recluse. He had been keeping tabs on the town. But why? And what did knowing too much mean? Chapter 3. Old Secrets. Word spread quickly about Erik's murder and the list of names. Sundfjord was a small town, and secrets rarely stayed buried. Rumors swirled. Some said Erik had been involved in illegal smuggling. Others claimed he had stumbled upon something he shouldn't have. Jakob found himself under increasing pressure. The townsfolk demanded answers, but he had none. His team combed through the list of names, interviewing those who weren't crossed out. Most were shocked to learn that they had been on Erik's radar. Others seemed evasive, offering little insight. One name stood out to Jakob: Vidar Hansen, a former logger who had retired early due to a back injury. Vidar's name was circled in Erik's notebook, with a note beside it: night visitor. Why? Jakob visited Vidar's home, a modest house near the edge of the forest. Vidar greeted him warmly but stiffened when Jakob mentioned Erik. "I haven't seen Erik in years," Vidar claimed, but Jakob noticed the man's hands trembling. Later that night, Jakob couldn't sleep. He went over the evidence again and again, feeling as though he were missing something. Why had Erik been keeping track of people? Why had he met someone at the lake that night? And why was Vidar so nervous? The pieces didn't fit, and the longer Jakob stared at them, the more tangled the puzzle became. Chapter 4: The Trap. A week after Erik's body was found, another discovery shocked the town. Gunnar, Jacob's oldest officer, stumbled upon a cache of stolen goods hidden in an abandoned boathouse. Jewelry, cash, even firearms, all linked to unsolved burglaries in the region. Among the items was a small wooden box with Erik's initials carved into it. Jakob examined the box carefully. Inside, he found a photograph of Erik with a group of men, all dressed in heavy coats, standing in front of what appeared to be a smuggling boat. The photo was dated 1972. Jakob recognized one of the men, Vidar. He felt a chill. Erik hadn't been an innocent recluse. He had been part of something larger, something dangerous. Jakob confronted Vidar again, this time armed with the photograph. Vidar broke down. He admitted that years ago he, Erik, and a few others had been involved in smuggling alcohol and cigarettes into the region. But when the operation fell apart, Erik had started keeping records, threatening to expose everyone if they didn't pay him off. Vidar claimed he had nothing to do with the murder, but Jakob wasn't convinced. Later that night, Jakob received a call from Astrid. Someone had broken into the station and stolen the notebooks they had taken from Erik's cabin. Whoever the killer was, they were cleaning up loose ends. Chapter 5: The Unlikely Escape. The tension in Sundfjord reached a breaking point when Lars went missing. Jakob's youngest officer had been patrolling the outskirts of town but hadn't returned. The townsfolk grew restless, and Jakob's team was stretched thin. He felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. A day later, they found Lars in the forest. He was alive but badly beaten, his police radio smashed. Lars managed to croak out a single name before losing consciousness. Hanni. Jakob and Astrid confronted Hanna at her store, but the woman was gone. A search of her home revealed nothing, but Jacob's instincts told him she was the killer. Hanna had ties to the smuggling ring, her store had been used to launder money, and Erik's blackmail had pushed her over the edge. She had killed Erik to silence him and stolen the notebooks to cover her tracks. Jakob organized a manhunt, scouring the forests and fjords. But Hanna was clever. She left a trail of false leads doubling back through the snowy wilderness. Finally, Jakob tracked her to an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. He confronted her alone, his revolver drawn. Hanna didn't deny her crimes. She admitted to killing Erik, to beating Lars, and to orchestrating the theft of the notebooks. "But you won't take me in," she said with a cold smile. Before Jakob could react, Hanna set fire to the cabin. The flames spread quickly and she disappeared into the chaos. Jakob barely escaped with his life, coughing and covered in soot. By the time the fire was extinguished, there was no trace of Hanna. Sundfjord returned to its quiet existence, but the shadow of the murderer lingered. Jakob knew Hanna was still out there, somewhere in the vast Norwegian wilderness. And though the case was officially closed, he couldn't shake the feeling that she would return one day. But for now, the snow fell, and the town remained silent. If you've enjoyed this story and would like to hear some more, do let us know in the comments below. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Thanks.